Okay, this public hearing, whereas the town of Berry is proposing construction of a 250,000 gallon elevated water storage tank and appurtenances near Pine Hill Road and Pask Road in the town of Berry to address system deficiencies. And whereas the proposed action includes all related site work, grading, driveways, and appurtenances, and a new pump to be constructed next to the existing tank to transfer water and upgrades to the existing pump station and tank at an estimated maximum cost of $5,244,850. And whereas the town board of the town of Berry classified the proposed action as a type 1 action, and now therefore, the town board of the town of Berry hereby resolves to hold a public hearing on September 10th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. at the Berry Town Hall to propose action by order of the town board, Maureen Beach. Okay. Is there anybody that so wishes or has any questions, or do we just listen to what Jason Wood, the engineer from CPL, has designed this proposal? Nobody has questions? Jason, do you wish to put anything that could go onto the public record?
No, I think you summarized the project very well. The purpose of this public hearing is to seek funding for VIA. The application is due this Friday, so we are right up against the deadline. But this public hearing resolution seeker is all part of that application.
Okay.
Everyone who signed in, please come on up to this public hearing.
Do you want to give the grant our estimates about what it's going to cost for what's going to cost? We want to get into that.
So I did not bring that with me, and I think we are in the $60 range. I'm sorry, I didn't bring that.
That's a race to the goal. That's why I'd like to leave.
Yep, that's.
You did that presentation to this town board twice so far. So we have an idea about it. We're all in agreement there was one, because this is a intermunicipal agreement, as along with the town of Albion. So it will be spread out amongst their people that they have are receiving water from the system as well as ours.
And it's really anywhere where the water migrates, so it doesn't get burned in. Anybody that water usage.
So if anybody, might be listening right now, no, it's not gonna fall all on the town of Berry. It's not gonna be on our shoulders. It's spread out evenly
debt service would increase depending on the grants.
So, again, there's scenarios whether,
Jason, can I ask you to do one favor? It looks like I'm bringing you in very well on my screen here. Could you turn this mic on so that I know you're being heard? Thank you.
Okay. Unfortunately, I did not bring those sheets with me, but really, until we get the funding package, the grant package from the funding agency, we really don't know what scenario we would have. In that scenario, I had basically no grants received. It was just typical borrowing. The second scenario was if we received a grant and had, a 6% interest rate, and then the third scenario being if we received a grant and had a 0% interest rate. So again, without, we wouldn't know that until we, receive something back from EFC.
The third one was quite reasonable.
That's very reasonable, right? But again, we can make that determination once we get the grant, if we get the grant. When we get the grant.
Anybody in the audience have questions? Wes, did you have one? Or not just your glasses?
I'm Sherry, comments on Facebook.
I don't think so. I haven't heard anything. Make accusations and hiding.
Were there any written comments submitted? No. Yeah.
Jason, has there been any water towers go up in western New York you know of lately?
The most recent one that I personally worked on was for the town of Elba. So that was, I believe, in about 2019, 2020. So that's the most recent.
That's bigger than what we're talking here, aren't we?
Yeah, so the one in Elba is 750,000 gallons. So ours, the one behind the fire hall is 150,000 gallons, so
Yeah.
more closer to that size than what Elba is. But it would be the same shape as what Elba is. That makes sense. So the final height of the tower is really kind of dependent on where the tower goes. So we've tentatively kind of placed it at an elevation, and it would be like 130 feet tall, which is similar to what the existing tower is. But depending on, the land availability, we still need to work through that process. So if the land is higher, the tank could be shorter, is, I guess, ultimately what, yeah. And it's funny, well, not to digress, but like the Elba tank sits on a little knoll, so it's not as tall as you think. So it's I think it's like maybe 100 feet, but it looks like it's really tall just because it kind of sits on a little knoll and hidden behind the trees, but.
Is most of the tank in that produced on site, or does it come in sections?
So the tank would literally comes like a jigsaw puzzle. It's pieces of steel, and they're all cut out and shaped, and they kind of build it and, you know, weld it up as they go. You know, there's a process, they kind of have a little crane internal to they kind of do the stem of the tank. So there's an access tube that actually goes up through the water. So there's no ladder around the outside, you go into the bottom, looks like a teepee, but to that bottom cone section, and then there's a tube that goes up through the water and then a hatch out on the top. So they kind of build that center column, use it as kind of a crane, and then they just kind of build it up, and, you know, they may have a crane later on to set the very, very top, but, you know, pretty much self-contained, and, you know, there's 3 or 4 companies in the country that really do it. There's not a lot, but, you know, they all have similar processes. Welding, I mean, some of that steel on the bottom will be an inch thick, quite heavy.
Well, that would be purchased through a bid, a sort of a bid.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if this moves forward, likely the tank would be a separate contract because that's very specialized. But, you know, the pump station construction and, you know, maybe the site stuff and the pressure reducing valve vaults, that could be a separate contract. So, you know, I kind of envision maybe 2 or 3 separate contracts to build it. But yes, there would be plans and specifications prepared, permits obtained, you know, and then everything would be bid out ideally at the same time, so we knew, you know, we had all the numbers, the bid numbers at the same time.
The town board would look at those bids.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, they, you know, once an engineer was hired, so if the towns, when they're successful in receiving the grant, you would hire an engineer, go through that process to do the design and permitting. Again, I think that would be better part of a year. I think most of 2026, and then maybe a bid it late 2026 in the winter. So you're really ready to go, hit the ground running with construction in the spring of 27. But yeah, I mean, you know, the typical process would be, you know, let the project out for bids. Contractors would pick up the plans, submit a bid on a certain day. The engineer would review the bids, make sure, you know, everything's there that needs to be there. Check the qualifications of the contractor or the low bidder, and then, you know, make a recommendation to the town board. But, you know, obviously the board would have, you know, you could review the plan, review the bids and review the bidder. So you would definitely have input on that, but typically the low bidder is what you would go with. Any of the fluoride, any of the chemicals that are added in the water would be through the Village of Albion. Right now, the town does not inject any chlorine. So it would change their license if they started doing that. But any of that fluoride would be through the Village of Albion.
Any other questions? There being none, then I'd like your motion to close this public hearing.
I'll make that motion.